Tamil Nadu's Cauvery Delta has cultivated rice for thousands of years, but the environmental warning signals indicate the days may be numbered for extensive rice production. Subsequently, when the supply of water from Cauvery River declined due to the interstate conflict in the 90s and 2000s, several farmers shifted towards fewer farming seasons annually. Due to the continuous pumping, Mayiladuthurai is now ranked 4th among Tamil Nadu's 38 districts, with the lowest groundwater left for future use. Tamil Nadu's paddy paradox, Cauvery Delta turns on the taps even as wells run dry. For Cauvery Delta farmers, cultivating paddy is as much a matter of duty and pride as livelihood, but the struggle to access water has driven them to desperation. A farmer pumping groundwater out to his paddy field in Cauvery Delta. Tamil Nadu's Cauvery Delta has cultivated rice for thousands of years, but the environmental warning signals indicate the days may be numbered for extensive rice production. In less than 3 decades, intensive methods of cultivation have transformed nearly everything regarding the place, with possibly irreversible impacts. It has increased water usage even as the dispute over the Cauvery River shut off water sources. The delta is now virtually drained dry and the soil depleted of nutrients. Rich native strains which nourished the soil, as well as the people cultivating it, have nearly vanished. Cauvery Delta is Tamil Nadu's food security giant. Planting paddy is as much about duty, honor, as about survival for the farmers here. But the fight over water access has pushed farmers to extremes. The delta is fed by the Cauvery River that originates from the neighboring Karnataka state. Soon after the Green Revolution introduced high-yielding, water-thirsty paddy varieties here in the 60s, Tamil Nadu's Cauvery water-sharing dispute with Karnataka escalated. As the conflict intensified in the 90s and 2000s, and water supply from rivers dwindled, farmers increasingly resorted to borewells, consuming more water rather than less. A 4-month inquiry by Navia PK reveals that farmers in this region are looking at a future of meager harvests, or even no future at all in farming. Part 1 examines how much water the farmers are extracting and how this will impact the residents of the delta, as well as the consumers of the rice produced here. Agriculture provides livelihood for most families in the Cauvery Delta. The option of growing less is out of the question. So if water becomes scarce, they simply dig deeper for it. The government assists by pumping the water out for free. But sooner or later, regardless of how deep the farmers dig, there will be no water. Almost all the Delta districts today extract water at an unsafe rate, says India's Groundwater Board. It will irretrievably affect water quality and supplies and stability of the terrain here. It is extracting more groundwater to plant more paddy. In the Green Revolution, the government actively encouraged planting paddy 3 times a year, an intensive farming that would mistakenly imply that farmers have unlimited inputs, including water. Subsequently, when the supply of water from Cauvery River declined due to the interstate conflict in the 90s and 2000s, several farmers shifted towards fewer farming seasons annually. But soon, they dug borewells and returned to their traditional 2- or 3-season paddy cultivation. Water was free and unlimited for a while after the borewells were dug. Then Ilavan 32 is among such a farmer in Surakotai village of Thanjavur. During the 2000s, his family had to scale down paddy cultivation from 2 to only 1 season because of Cauvery water scarcity. But they have returned to 2-season cultivation after sinking a borewell 10 years ago. Now Thenalavan farms the entire Kuruvai season between June and September by pumping his borewell round the clock. But his anxiety peaks this season. After summer, water level in the borewell would already be low. If the monsoon is also poor, water level drops suddenly, and I keep worrying if the crop will die after everything I spent on it. In places such as Orathanadu and Thanjavur, borewells seem to have been drilled to a depth of 700 to 1,000 feet so that crops of all 3 seasons of paddy can be cultivated. Thanjavur, Thiruvallur, Nagapattinam, and Mayiladuthurai are the districts covered by Cauvery Delta, along with segments of 5 other districts. 2/5 of Tamil Nadu's rice is grown by these districts alone, and and half of this is taken up by just Thanjavur and Thiruvarur. Made with Flourish Pew. In this piece, we examine 7 delta districts that cultivate rice as their primary crop: Thanjavur, Thiruvarur, Mayiladuthurai, Nagapattinam, Pudukkottai, Cuddalore, and Tiruchirappalli. To cultivate just paddy, they collectively withdraw 1,300 billion liters of groundwater annually, the same as emptying Chennai's Velachery Lake 10,000 times. Farmers' use of groundwater is also growing year by year. Our examination of Central Groundwater Board, CGWB, data indicates. Combined, these districts now pump a third more groundwater for paddy cultivation than they did a decade ago. Groundwater use in every delta district, with the exception of Thiruvarur, grew in the last decade. Thanjavur is the largest user among the districts, consuming a third of the water. Made with Flourish, Thiruvarur farmers use less groundwater for several reasons. The district is large and has an extensive unlined canal network that could be recharging groundwater, says IIT Bombay Associate Professor and Hydrologist Prof. P. Chinnasamy. And groundwater is too salty for farmers in some areas to use. Conversely, the use of water increased most sharply in Nagapattinam and Mayiladuthurai districts together, doubling during the decade. Because Nagapattinam was split into these 2 districts in 2020, CGWB has only included combined figures for both. According to Prof. Chinnasamy, the consumption of groundwater and agricultural practices in the Delta went up as improved technology and improved pumps made water more readily available, but not increased its availability. In all Delta districts, with the exception of Thiruvarur, paddy farmers' greater use of groundwater also coincides with a rise in the gross cropped area, total area cultivated over several seasons in a year. This implies, as the paddy cultivation area rises, farmers are using more groundwater to supply the water requirement. Made with Flourish, water extraction persists despite warning signs. Farmers who eventually exhaust groundwater do not have a lot of alternatives: drill further down and risk it, or exit the line of business. The 2016-2017 drought, in fact, drove more than 100 farmers in the district to take their own lives. Veeramani N., 69, a former school headmaster and farmer, Arayapuram village, Mayiladuthurai district, uses borewells for paddy production 2 times per year. When he began agriculture 25 years ago, water in his borewell was available at 40 feet, whereas today the level of water has gone down to 150 to 200 feet. Asked what would happen if his borewells are depleted, Veeramani replies, "Then we will also drill to 1,000 feet, as done by people of Karur and Salem districts." 3/4 of the paddy land cultivated in this district is dependent on borewells, says an officer at the Office of the Joint Director, Agriculture, Mayiladuthurai. But it doesn't indicate that farmers get sufficient water. On an average, half the farmers in the district are assured of water supply. The others are betting. Ironically, though most farmers experience water uncertainty, some farmers in some areas of the district with adequate groundwater pump as much as possible to cultivate paddy all 3 seasons, including summer when there is no other source of water. Due to the continuous pumping, Mayiladuthurai is now ranked 4th among Tamil Nadu's 38 districts, with the lowest groundwater left for future use. Thanjavur is among the lower half districts. Nagapattinam is the worst off, being left out of CGWB's district list entirely, since all its units it had assessed contained only salty, unusable water. The data from the last decade by CGWB indicates these districts are overexploiting their groundwater, meaning that they extract more water every year than can be replenished. Rather than closing water extraction when crisis levels were reached, the groundwater supply is either reaching rock bottom or salinating with salt. While Thiruvarur, Tiruchirappalli, and Cuddalore take 70 to 90% of the extractable groundwater, landing them in CGWB's semi-critical zone. Of the 7 districts, safe extraction levels only existed in Pudukkottai. Veeramani in Mayiladuthurai and Thenilavan in Thanjavur report that already a few marginal farmers in their villages have stopped farming due to water scarcity. These kinds of farmers sell or rent out their fields to the rich farmers who have the money to dig borewells. I don't know what happens tomorrow. Within 10 years, the level of water here can drop to 500 to 600 feet, says Thenilavan. Even if we invest more, we can't forecast climate change. We encounter excess or low rainfall frequently now, resulting in crop damage. In the Delta's tail-end villages near the coast, Thenelavan's worst nightmare has already come true. Tail-end villages already in distress, a portent of what's to come. Understanding what happened in the tail-end villages, where rice is barely viable now due to water over-extraction and loose regulation of water resources, is crucial to preventing a similar fate across the region, according to our data and experts. In the coastal tail-end villages, which are getting the end and minimum Cauvery water, borewells were trendier even during the 70s. Much later, during the 2000s, almost all the farmers got them dug. Through sand mining, industrial water drilling, and depletion of groundwater here, this groundwater has already depleting now. Due to groundwater depletion, seawater invaded the aquifers. Having no authority over the availability of water, almost all the farmers here plant only a single crop of paddy every year. Even that crop could perish in the ever more common floods and droughts plaguing the area. In Manakolai village, Cuddalore, farmer R. Radhakrishnan lost the paddy crop on more than a third of his land, 14 acres, in the fungal cyclone that struck the Delta in November. Radhakrishnan, 72, claims he will have to spend Rs 10,000, 15,000 per acre to get the land ready again, sow and transplant new seedlings. That is a total of up to 2 lakh. Farmers claim the government's crop insurance scheme barely pays for such losses. Farmer R. Radhakrishnan at his paddy field that was ravaged during Cyclone Fengal last November. Farmer R. Radhakrishnan at his paddy field that was ravaged during Cyclone Fengal last November. Image by Navya PK. In Kumarachi, yet another tail-end area in Cuddalore covering 58 villages, borewells spread approximately 20 years ago, but got dried up in 10 years, according to Anbajagan M., a farmer in this place. Now every village has just 1 to 2 borewells with water at around 600 feet depth, belonging to affluent farmers. Others rely on rain and the Cauvery water available. He claims to make barely profits from his 4-acre paddy field now, and cultivates cotton for half the year as it requires less water. Even drinking water is hard to come by in the tail-end villages these days. Dr. S. Janakarajan, economist and president of South Asia Consortium for Interdisciplinary Water Resources Studies, Seawater, says the experience of tail-end villages is a precursor to the future of the entire delta. Groundwater pumping and intrusion of seawater resulted in 100% salinity in Nagapattinam district. Here the damage is already done, and as the delta is a coastal area, you have more floods, so it's flood or drought. So food security will be severely threatened. A 2023 modeling study estimated an increase of 39% of seawater intrusion in the delta by 2050 if the groundwater is being depleted at its current rate. Dr. Janakarajan also cautions against the land subsidence or sinking occurring in Cauvery Delta as a result of extracting groundwater and hydrocarbons. CGWB Regional Director Chennai didn't get back to us on our query regarding any steps they've taken to regulate water extraction in the Delta. The state government should have spent big money recharging groundwater and restricting farmers' extraction here, states Dr. K. Ramaswamy, former member of the State Planning Commission, Agriculture and Irrigation, and former Vice Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu Agricultural University. Water extraction occurs during the summer, third cropping season, in a substantial portion of the Delta area, so the government need not provide free power during the months from January to June. But simultaneously, during these months, TNAU should encourage cultivation of pulses that require less water, and the government should buy back pulses from farmers at the MSP or organize the logistics for sale, he suggests. This can initially be done in, say, 15 villages as a 3-year model project. Though the TNAU had promoted pulses cultivation long ago, many farmers didn't adopt it due to the lack of support. Dr. Ramaswamy also recommends constructing groundwater recharge structures on riverbeds and freshwater tanks along the coast, which would enhance groundwater levels and keep it from mixing with seawater. None of this is new. These have been among TNAU's recommendations, individual bureaucrats' initiatives, and farmers' associations' demands. But these projects didn't gain traction in the lack of sustained government support. Part of the Cauvery Canal system in Kumarachi, Regular desilting and removal of encroachments in canals have long been demanded by farmers to facilitate proper groundwater recharge. Part of the Cauvery Canal system in Kumarachi. Regular desilting and removal of encroachments in canals have long been demanded by farmers to facilitate proper groundwater recharge. Meanwhile, Delta farmers continue to demand more Cauvery River water, hoping it will solve their problems. But no solution seems to be forthcoming, especially as Karnataka plans to build one more dam upstream. It is not only climate change and groundwater depletion that are driving farmers to the edge. Part 2 of this probe examines how extensive, intensive farming methods designed to harvest rice faster and cheaper have gone awry.